All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my amendment will potentially save lives by making our civil airways safer for pilots and passengers. It will direct the FAA to prioritize the most important R&D activities in its portfolio and will facilitate aviation safety research that our nation depends on. I'm an Air Force veteran and a private pilot, and I fully understand the importance of the many aspects of aviation safety and the role that research plays in improving the stability of flight operations. My amendment keeps the authorized spending levels in the bill at the same overall levels as proposed by the FAA's National Aviation Research Plan, while directing nearly $20 million a year to aviation safety. Here are some of the critically important items that FAA's aviation safety research supports: fire safety, aircraft icing, catastrophic failure prevention, structural safety, aeromedical research, weather programs, aviation cybersecurity, human error, and drone collision avoidance. In my experience as an aviator, I had to be concerned about every one of these factors at one point or another, and our nation must remain ahead of the curve in order to avoid disasters in our constantly evolving airspace. A few years ago, Mr. Chairman, I was called at 7 o'clock in the morning as a member of a search and rescue team with the Civil Air Patrol of a missing aircraft that wasn't very far from where we operated our search and rescue. It was in the North Georgia mountains. The gentleman had taken off from an airport in South Georgia along the coast, was heading to Cleveland, Ohio, and never reported in, never landed. We were alerted at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning, and it was determined instead of flying the mission, they actually needed more help because of the rugged terrain, leading a ground crew into search for the pilot. By the time we got into position, our air crews had spotted the crash, but unfortunately, by the time we got to the crash, the pilot had deceased. He had survived the crash, and he had the fortitude to crawl out of the plane, write a note to his family, and had his bags of medication next to him. As one of the first members on the scene, I had the unfortunate responsibility of reading the note to his family, which he knew that he would not survive that crash. This crash could have been prevented and lives saved with proper aviation safety training. As an incident that happened in 2013 also reminds me of why safety research is so important. A small jet with 2 pilots was flying over Kansas when it entered an area with severe icing, which caused the flight instruments to malfunction, a situation that not as severe, but I have been in myself. The pilots became disoriented, and while trying to manually guide the flight, so much ice had accumulated that they lost control of the plane. It crashed. This kind of accident demonstrates that the FAA's aviation safety research is essential to maintaining the security of our airspace and must not be underfunded. My amendment also comes at a time when the EPA is receiving $8 billion a year in appropriations, and as we have learned in this committee, the EPA is regulating businesses into the ground. On top of that, virtually every other federal agency, almost every other federal agency, is also doing some form of environmental research, and there is no shortage of taxpayers' dollars going to these projects. But civil aviation safety is only conducted by the Federal Aviation Administration. But the administration still doesn't seem to think that this is enough. The President's budget request, which was released earlier this week, asked for 166% more funding for FAA environmental research as compared to when the President took office. Unfortunately, the budget request only calls for a 7% increase in aviation safety research funding since 2008. It's time for us to provide a counterweight to this administration's obsessive focus on the environment and make sure that our airspace is safe and secure for both pilots and for passengers. In conclusion, this amendment will focus FAA research and development on its most critical purpose, aviation safety. I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back.